The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
Some 300 South Koreans detained in the U.S. are set to return on a flight home as early as Wednesday local time. Seoul's top diplomat Jong-un will finalize arrangements for their safe return home and discuss fundamental U.S. visa solutions with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Tuesday. President Lee Jae-myung has once again stressed the importance of stabilizing grocery prices and called for bold measures to tame inflation. North Korea claims to have tested a new missile engine. Experts believe the North could unveil a new intercontinental ballistic missile as soon as the upcoming October 10th anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea. The government is working for a swift return of Koreans arrested at Hyundai's Georgia plant in the U.S. through a chartered flight as early as Wednesday local time. Now, beyond this issue, Seoul will seek improvements in visa issues with the U.S., and President Lee Jae-myung has raised the need for such developments. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
Around 300 South Koreans detained in the United States are expected to board a chartered flight home within the next day. A foreign ministry official told reporters on Tuesday that a chartered plane is being arranged to bring back Korean nationals from Georgia after they were arrested en masse last Thursday at a Hyundai LG battery plant. The government is aiming for a departure on Wednesday local time and is currently coordinating the details with business officials and the airline involved. According to sources in the aviation sector, a Korean Air aircraft is expected to depart Atlanta late in the afternoon and arrive at Korea's Incheon airport late on Thursday Korea time. The released Koreans will first be transported from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Detention Center in southern Georgia and travel some 428 kilometers to catch their charter flight. After a weekend of negotiations, Seoul said Monday it secured the early release and return of detainees through their voluntary departure. To ensure their smooth release, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun arrived in Washington, D.C. on Monday local time with a rapid response team from Seoul. Cho will likely meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other senior Trump administration officials on Tuesday. He's expected to press Washington to ensure that the returning workers will not face penalties such as bans on re-entry to the US. The minister has also emphasized he will address broader visa issues affecting Korean firms investing in America. This could include creating a new professional visa category for Korean nationals, so companies can dispatch essential staff to the US more smoothly. Cho is also expected to stress that Korean firms have already made large-scale investments in the US and that future projects depend on stable conditions. The raid last week by US immigration authorities took place at a factory that's part of Hyundai's $12.6 billion investment in Georgia, known to be the largest economic development project in the state's history. President Lee Jae-myung at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday also pushed for a systematic solution.
한미 양국의 동반 발전을 위한 우리 국민과 기업의 활동에 부당한 침해가 가해지는 일이 다시는 재발하지 않기를 바랍니다. 우리 정부는 유사한 사례가 반복되지 않도록 미국과의 긴밀한 협의를 통해 합리적 제도 개선을 신속하게 추진해 나가겠습니다.
In light of the recent arrests, Korean firms have raised concerns over their future business in America, while public sentiment has also been unsettled. A survey by Realmeter conducted this week found 6 in 10 Koreans find the mass arrests at the US plant disappointing and excessive.
Time is of the essence. How quickly and effectively this crisis is resolved between the two allied nations could directly influence Korean public sentiment, not to mention the future of Korean investments in the United States. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung held a cabinet meeting today, which was broadcast live and full to tamp down higher grocery prices. Also discussed were ways to boost the economy, for which the cabinet seeks to bring in more foreign visitors. Yoon Jung-min reports.
민생 안정을 위해서는 구조적인 장바구니 물가 불안이 반드시 해소돼야 합니다. 소비자와 생산자가 모두 체감할 수 있도록 불합리한 유통구조 개혁에 보다 속도를 내주시기 바랍니다.
That was a core message delivered by President Lee Jae-myung during a weekly cabinet meeting on Tuesday, as taking care of the people's livelihoods has become the single most visited topic for the president ahead of his first 100 days in office. He noted that the complicated distribution process pushes grocery prices up, and the 2-hour-long discussion, which was broadcast live in full, largely focused on tamping down prices.
We need to shift toward a smart distribution structure. We aim for a transition where about 50% of transactions are made through an online wholesale market.
One of the ideas pitched to address the problem was creating an online or mobile platform using AI, where people can easily compare prices.
정부가 투자하고 민간도 일부 투자하고 해서 플랫폼 하나 만들어서 농산물 거래 시스템을 새로 만들 수도 있는 거 아니에요?
The focus was also on boosting the economy, for which tourism was highlighted, with the aim of bringing in more than 30 million foreign visitors to the country, not just to Seoul, but areas outside the capital. Part of the action plan includes creating tourism products on a large scale that can attract foreigners.
We will renew our tourism resources and content that each region owns and make the most of the influence of K-culture. K-pop Demon Hunters has attracted so many tourists to Namsan and Bukchon Hanok Village.
But the ugly side of society was also pointed out by the president.
관광객을 늘려야 되는데 얼마 전에 어디 그 기사를 보니까 특정 국가 관광객을 모욕하는 집회를 하고 있던데.
He was referring to controversial rallies led by far-rightists in Myeongdong, where the Chinese embassy is located, insulting China and tourists from that country. The president instructed the officials to come up with measures to ban those, while calling for the need to focus on promoting K-food and K-beauty among high-value-added industries. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The overall economic downturn in South Korea has somewhat softened in recent weeks, driven largely by consumer spending. Park Jun-han has the details.
South Korea's economy is experiencing a slight easing of its slowdown, primarily driven by consumer spending, despite persistent weaknesses in construction investment and prevalent global trade risks. This is according to the monthly report released Tuesday by the state-run think tank, the Korea Development Institute, analyzing the nation's economy. All industry production rose 1.9% in July from a year earlier. However, despite the increase, construction remained weak, and manufacturing capacity utilization stayed low, resulting in a 14.2% drop from the same period last year. Industrial production in July, which includes mining and manufacturing, rose 5% year-on-year. Notably, semiconductor output jumped 20.5%, while motor vehicles and electronic parts also posted gains from a year earlier. Exports to the U.S. in August underperformed as they declined by 8.1% year-on-year. Despite strong semiconductor shipments, exports were dragged down by motor vehicles and parts and steel, which are subject to high tariffs.
Export fluctuations depend on whether companies choose to raise prices to offset tariffs, but strategies have not yet been finalized. And in sectors like automobiles, tariffs have been agreed to be lowered but are not yet in effect. So, considerable uncertainty still remains.
In the meantime, the KDI pointed to signs of improved stability in the credit market and domestic consumption. Consumer sentiment, which is considered optimistic if it's over 100, remained strong at 111.4 for August, supported by falling market interest rates and the government stimulus, including a second round of supplementary budget and distribution of livelihood recovery consumption coupons. Park Junan, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has nominated veteran lawyer Ri Chul-hwan as one of the 9 commissioners of South Korea's National Election Commission. That is, according to Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik on Tuesday. Now, of the commission's 9 seats, 3 are appointed by the president, though they all require a confirmation hearing and approval at the National Assembly. The president's office also announced the creation of a commission on pop culture exchange, which will be co-led by Culture Minister Choi Hee-young and K-pop producer Park Jin-young. Gang described Bak as one of Korea's leading artists who helped globalize K-pop, saying he'll work to further promote Korean culture abroad while broadening cultural exchange at home. Now, another change at the president's office is the creation of a senior secretary for personnel affairs to strengthen internal vetting of public office candidates. The Lee Jae-myung administration and the ruling party have announced their government reorganization plan, featuring major dismantling and restructuring and sparking a backlash from the opposition parties. For more on this, we turn to our political correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Welcome back, Ha-young.
Good evening.
So, Ha-young, why don't we go over with the key changes in the government reorganization plan? Walk us through them.
Well, one of the most notable changes is the dismantling of the prosecutor's office. 70 years after its establishment in 1948. And the plan announced Sunday reflects the prosecution reform goals of the ruling Democratic Party, the government, and the presidential office. And under the plan, the prosecutor's office will be dismantled and replaced by 2 new agencies, one under the Justice Ministry handling indictments and another under the Interior Ministry handling investigations. And the changes will take effect 1 year after the plan is approved by the National Assembly and announced to the public, with a task force under the Prime Minister's office set up to work out the details of the reform.
Prosecution reform is one of the president's key pledges. There have been ongoing concerns that the prosecution has abused its unchecked power and undermined fairness, with selective investigations and arbitrary indictments deepening public distrust.
And reorganization will also affect the Finance Ministry, which will continue handling taxation, economic policy, and treasury matters, but budget planning will be transferred to a new agency under the Prime Minister's supervision. And the Environment Ministry will be expanded to take over energy policy responsibilities that are currently handled by the Industry Ministry. A new Deputy Prime Minister for Science and Technology will be created to oversee AI, and the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs position held by the Education Minister will be abolished.
Now, Ha-young, I mentioned a strong backlash from the opposition parties. How is the ruling parties, what is the ruling party's plan going forward from here?
Well, first of all, the announcement of the government reorganization plan immediately sparked a backlash from the main opposition, People Power Party. And the PPP claimed it was not a reorganization, but rather the destruction of government. Take a listen.
This government reorganization plan that splits, dismantles, and adds agencies is a reckless experiment on the executive branch and our constitutional order.
And regarding prosecution reform, the PPP floor leader called it political retaliation against the prosecution for investigating Democratic Party figures, adding that if the Interior Ministry also takes control of the investigation agency, it could become a monster ministry. And despite the backlash, the ruling DP plans to pass the government reorganization plan in the National Assembly's plenary session later this month. And take a listen to what the DP leader had to say.
Reform is all about timing. This Chuseok holiday, we will share the good news that the prosecutor's office has been abolished and is now part of history.
And the DP leader also said that if the prosecution reform succeeds, it'll be thanks to President Lee Jae-myung's strong determination and leadership, adding that the party, government, and presidential office will work together as one to ensure a smooth follow-up.
So there's that, the ongoing political standoff between the rival parties. But in the meantime, President Lee Jae-myung did meet with the leaders of the two main parties here in South Korea. Hae-young, how did that go?
Well, yesterday's lunch meeting was indeed in the spotlight. And beforehand, tensions were so high that many wondered if the ruling and opposition leaders would even shake hands. But they met and were seen smiling and shaking hands. And the president and the two parties agreed to create a consultative body on livelihood-related matters with the details to be finalized later. And the PPP leader raised concerns over the lack of national consensus on the reorganization plan and urged caution on prosecution reform, while President Lee said that the opposition's views would be fully reflected. And of course, many issues remain, and one meeting won't immediately smooth out cooperation between the rival parties. And in fact, the DP plans to push for expanding the powers of the ongoing special counsel investigations at the upcoming plenary session this week. And Monday's event was definitely a first step toward cooperation, but how much progress they make on specific issues will likely shape the political landscape.
Indeed, Hae-young, thank you as always for coming in.
My pleasure.
North Korea claims to have successfully conducted the final ground test for a new high-thrust solid-fuel engine, signaling its imminent reveal of a new intercontinental ballistic missile. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
North Korea, with leader Kim Jong-un's oversight, has conducted the final ground test for a new high-thrust solid-fuel engine for its Hwasong-20 ICBM. That's according to the North Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday. The report claimed the test was successful and quoted Kim as saying it heralds a momentous change for his nuclear forces. It also confirmed this was the 9th and final test in the engine's development, including details such as a maximum thrust of 1971 kilonewtons, and that the carbon fiber makes the engine lighter and more efficient. The news also comes a week after Kim inspected the motor's development ahead of his trip to China. An official at Seoul's Unification Ministry noted that the specific details were carried by the international-facing KCNA, but not the domestic-facing Nodongshinmun newspaper, suggesting the message is intended for an external audience. Analysts expect the new intercontinental ballistic missile to be unveiled soon.
I believe they will reveal the actual missile on the 80th Party Foundation anniversary and likely conduct a test launch before the year's end to mark the completion of the 5-year plan, and as a celebratory launch for next year's 9th Party Congress.
The test timing, just after leader Kim Jong-un's return from China, is seen by analysts as a key part of Pyongyang's strategic messaging, especially as the KCNA also reported that Kim visited the construction site of a major hospital in North Korea and has stressed that building provincial hospitals is a top priority, calling it a vital project to provide people outside Pyongyang with advanced medical services.
While maintaining close ties with China and Russia, we must see the context here is to emphasize that it is an independent nation, not subordinate to these great powers, through its own nuclear capabilities. Therefore, conducting an advanced weapons test like this right after the China visit, and also giving guidance on a hospital construction, is an intention to show he is a tireless leader, working hard for both military and civil affairs.
Analysts also said this could be a strategic move before Kim sets up a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. With the new ICBM reportedly capable of hitting American soil, it could be to elevate the regime's position prior to any talks with the U.S. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, over in the Middle East, Gaza City is under fresh evacuation orders from Israel. It's also been hit by more Israeli strikes in the past few days. Park Hyo-bin tells us more.
Israel's army on Tuesday morning issued its first order for the full evacuation of Gaza City ahead of an expanded ground operation in the north. Israeli defense minister said 30 towers had been torn down so far, accusing Hamas of turning them into hubs of military activity. This comes after Israel leveled another high-rise in Gaza on Monday, part of its push to seize control of the city. Gaza's health ministry said 65 people have been killed and more than 300 wounded by Israeli fire over the past 24 hours. The Israeli military has been targeting prominent high-rise buildings for 4 consecutive days, saying Hamas installed surveillance infrastructure inside them. Israel and the U.S. are both pressing Hamas to release the hostages and agreed to a new ceasefire plan. The so-called Last Warning Initiative, unveiled by Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, outlines a negotiated end to the war with Israeli troops pulling out of Gaza once the hostages are freed and a ceasefire takes hold. Speaking in Hungary on Sunday, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar confirmed Israel had accepted the U.S. proposal.
President Trump said it clearly yesterday. Israel said yes to his proposal. We are ready to accept a full deal that would end the war based on the cabinet decision.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doubled down, demanding Hamas release all captives.
The war is also continuing in the Gaza Strip, where we will destroy Hamas, as we promised, and bring back our hostages, all of our hostages.
U.S. President Donald Trump also pressed Hamas, calling the situation a hell of a problem and urging the group to accept the deal.
I think we're going to have a deal on Gaza very soon. It's a hell of a problem. So they have hostages, but we have, let's say, 20 people, and we have about 38 bodies.
Trump also wrote on his Truth Social that everyone wants the hostages home and everyone wants this war to end. It is time for Hamas to accept. It remains unclear whether the ceasefire proposal will succeed. Netanyahu and Trump insist on hostage releases first, while Hamas demands a full ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces before freeing any captives. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
Seoul is hosting an annual forum that seeks to share innovation strategies for future mobility, from autonomous vehicles to flying taxis, now all under an inclusive transport system. Our Moon Ji-young was there.
The future of transport and mobility is being shaped here in Seoul. The third edition of the Global Mobility Conference opened on Tuesday, bringing together experts from around the world to discuss how to create more inclusive, resilient, safe, and accessible transport systems. This forum, co-hosted by the Korean government and the OECD International Transport Forum, aims to map out innovative solutions to redefine future on the move.
Mobility is almost a blood system of society and the economy, and we need to take good care of that system as we move forward. We need to take a global approach to regulating mobility, and in this sense, the leadership of the Republic of Korea is extremely important.
Looking into how we might travel in the future, automaker Hyundai Motor stressed the need to prepare for an era where mobility becomes an essential utility, much like electricity is today.
Transportation in the future will involve self-moving mobility devices centrally managed by the cloud. These devices will be interconnected with cities serving as the infrastructure. We are developing them not merely as vehicles for transport, but as AI learning machines capable of continuously enhancing user value and improving device functionality.
The Korean Transport Ministry has highlighted the importance of bolstering policies to ensure mobility rights and inclusivity in the era of future mobility. The two-day conference also includes discussions on the commercialization of autonomous driving and urban air mobility, as well as addressing the mobility rights of disadvantaged groups. Global institutions saw today's conference as a meaningful opportunity to share innovation strategies for future mobility with the world and strengthen the foundation for global cooperation. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Rain has been continuing today mainly in the southern parts of the country, and there will be more rain until tomorrow morning. As for the amount of rainfall, more than 80 millimeters of heavy rain will be concentrated on Jeju Island, the south coast, and around Chirisa Mountain. About 5 to 60 millimeters of rain is forecast in other southern regions, and 5 millimeters in Chungcheongnam-do province. All the heatwave warnings have been lifted in inland areas as a cold and dry northern wind blew and the heat eased off. Today's daytime temperatures were 1 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday in the southern parts of the country. However, heatwave advisories are still in place in some parts of Jeju Island. Tomorrow morning will start cool at 20 degrees Celsius in Seoul, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, 18 degrees in Daejeon. Highs will go up to 32 degrees in Seoul, 29 degrees in Busan and Jeju. Rain will continue on Jeju Island on Friday, and it will rain all over the country again on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
해금은 두 줄로 된 현악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음, 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음, 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 뭔가 전통적인 주법들, 식임새, 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. This September, Korea holds the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council, giving Seoul a rare platform to highlight issues of its choice. President Lee Jae-myung will become the first Korean leader to preside over a council session focusing on artificial intelligence and international security while deliberately leaving North Korea off the agenda. On September 23rd, the spotlight shifts to New York. President Lee delivers his debut speech at the UN General Assembly the same day President Donald Trump addresses the gathering, fueling speculation about another possible summit. And with the APEC summit in Gyeongju just weeks later, Korea now faces back-to-back diplomatic challenges. To help us unpack the stakes and implications, we connect to Im Eun-jung, professor of international studies at Gyeongju National University. A big welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Andrew Millard, Assistant Professor of International Relations at Changwon National University. Good to see you.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's start with Professor Lim. So, like I've said, South Korea is serving as the president of the UN Security Council this September. What does this actually mean for Korea's international standing?
I think we are very lucky because this year is such a big year. As we just watched it last week, for example, China, they just celebrated the Victory Day, 80th anniversary of their Victory Day. But China is not the only one, of course, who celebrates the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II or Pacific War in this region. Of course, you know, for South Korea, again, this is the 80th anniversary of the liberation. And at the same time, of course, in the global history, again, the United Nations was established in order to avoid any further war, and it reflected historical lessons from the failure of League of Nations. So this year is a really remarkable year for the UN as well, because they also celebrate the 80th anniversary of the establishment. Of course, UN Day is October. However, September is really big month every year for UN because General Assembly will be held in the third week of the September. And thankfully and very fortunately, South Korea this month, again, we're going to be chairing the Security Council because, you know, every just month, the chair will be changing and then it's in alphabetical order. So this was a big coincidence, very fortunate coincidence. So I think we can just, you know, take a very big this opportunity to reveal how we think about the global peace or many other important agendas, such as, again, the AI, or even climate change or human rights issue. Again, I think the timing is really good for South Korea, and it is very remarkable, I will say. Mm-hmm.
Right, definitely. It's a very good opportunity for Korea to be on the driver's seat at this very critical time. So with this, we'll see President Lee Jae-myung. He will personally preside over the Security Council session, which marks the first for a Korean leader to do so. Professor Millard, how symbolic is this moment?
Well, I think Professor Im kind of hit the nail on the head. This is really perfect timing for Korea. So as Professor Im said, the fact that South Korea is holding the presidency this month and it's the UN General Assembly, it's excellent and really an excellent opportunity for President Lee to be the first president to chair one of the Security Council meetings. Now, this is quite unusual. Most of the meetings, they're chaired just by the ambassadors, and South Korea, it's been part of the UN Security Council a few times now. The first time back in 1996 and 97, then in 2013 and 2014, and now for the third time last year and this year. And it's coming towards the end of its time. So you could also say this is even better just before they're leaving the Security Council, probably for another few years. It's a good way to leave on a very high note. Now, in terms of the significance, as Professor Im also mentioned, they can set the agenda. The presidency, they set the agenda. It's going to be AI, international security issues, overcoming democratic challenges, and so on. But really, for the president to be there, this is adding extra weight. This is saying, South Korea, we're not just interested in these issues. We want to be a global leader in these issues. We don't just want to participate. We want to be leading. And it's also significant because in these official meetings, everything's highly prepared, highly planned, where President Lee can really start to make some personal connections with the other leaders, but with the ambassadors as well, these high-level officials. It's during the break times, before the meeting, after the meeting, during the informal, off-camera times. So this is really an extra opportunity for him to make those connections with global high-level officials.
Right. So the symbolism of this sitting president chairing the meeting is certainly very noteworthy and would be a very good opportunity. Now, specifically, like we've said, Korea chose artificial intelligence and international security as the theme for the opening debate. So, Professor Lim, how significant is it for Korea to actually push with this agenda on the world stage?
I think we have lots of opportunity and capability, and at the same time responsibility too. AI is of course kind of overarching theme for our contemporary time, and of course it can complement the shortage of working labor for the country like again the Korea, because we already experiencing the shortage of the especially the skilled labor, or in some specific industries such as again the agriculture or manufacturing industry, we really are struggling with the shortage of labor. But thanks to the AI like technology, automation, robotization can be can move on further. The thing is, AI technology per se is absolutely is a positive thing for mankind, for human. The thing is, again, the regulation issue and the ethics issue. This is another very philosophical and fundamental challenge, I think, for the human beings. Of course, technologically speaking, for example, China-like country also is really, really advanced. So China, US-China strategic rivalry, it is not only about AI, but AI is also one of the hottest, arena where the two superpowers are really competing. But not only just technologically, how can we, again, the better use, again, the AI for the sake of human beings? What kind of regulations should be made on? Of course, those kind of discussion should be made, and I think I expect we can see those kind of very active discussions in the Security Council. And South Korea, in that sense, I think in a very good position. Of course, we have many advanced technologies, but at the same time, South Korea has been always trying to be a good member of the international or global society, and we have tried to comply with the existing rule for the sake of of course, our own country, but not only for the South Korea itself, but also for the globe or the mankind in more general. And South Korea is not a superpower. We can be categorized as, I think, a middle power, or some will disagree with the categorization. But I will say, just for our convenience, South Korea is a middle power, and as a middle power, again, we can show our good behavior, and at the same time we are not threatening to, we are not that much scary to anybody else. I mean, in the room, again, in the United Nations Security Council or in UN General Assembly in general. So in that sense, I again expect a lot from this opportunity. Again, I hope, as Professor Millard pointed out, I hope we can really lead the discussion. Again, we can just contribute to the selecting a right direction for the global society.
Right, let's certainly hope so. But as for the topic, surprisingly, Seoul has not decided to schedule any meetings on North Korea this time around. Professor Millard, why do you think the government is kind of avoiding this issue, and what kind of message could this send?
So you're right. North Korea is not on the agenda. So when they published the agenda, a lot of people were quite surprised that North Korea isn't on the agenda, especially because back in 2023, just a couple of years ago, South Korea did hold a meeting regarding human rights issues in North Korea. So it's surprising that it's not on there. However, you could argue it's actually quite a good choice from South Korea not to have North Korea on the agenda, because North Korea you would expect to be on the agenda. This has been traditionally one of the main topics for South Korean foreign policy. And maybe the South Korean government this time is trying not to pigeonhole itself so that everyone does it. Of course, they'll be talking about North Korea. Because for South Korea, let's face it, not too much has really changed in the relationship with North Korea. North Korea's position has changed, and I'll talk about that in a second, but for South Korea, not so much. So the South Korean administration, this time they're saying, let's leave North Korea to the side. It's still a very important issue. If North Korea makes any sort of provocation, of course, we'll put it straight on the agenda. But for now, we're going to focus on the issues that are important to South Korea, where, again, South Korea can take more of a leadership role, have more of an impact globally. So I think that's one of the reasons they didn't put it on. But also, like I just mentioned, North Korea's position has changed. North Korea has aligned itself much more closely with Russia and with China. And we saw last week in the military parade in Beijing that Kim Jong-un was right at the very front. Kim Jong-un is quite emboldened now. And so I think it's the right choice for South Korea's administration just to take a little step back, not to rush into any meetings just for the sake of having a meeting just because it's the UN General Assembly. They need to take a step back, look at the whole picture, understand the relations not just between North and South Korea, but between South Korea and China, South Korea and Russia, South Korea, US, Japan, China. All of these relations together create this wider picture. So I do think it's the right choice that it's not on the agenda.
Right, so it could be a smart move given the changes that we've been seeing lately and the sensitivity of the issue. Then, Professor Miller, let's also touch upon this UN General Assembly. We are aware that President Lee will deliver his first address on September 23rd. Then what kind of a global message is he hoping to deliver?
So I think one of the key messages that I've heard he's going to discuss is the way to overcome challenges to democracy. And I think this is really a very key issue that South Korea has a lot of experience in, has a lot of credibility in. Not just the fact that South Korea from sort of the 1980s itself has democratized in general, but of course we have 2016, 2017, Park Geun-hye was impeached, and then just very recently, in the past year, President Yoon attempted martial law, was then impeached, the whole process. But this was a very calm process, a very peaceful process. Just the same as back in 2016, it was generally peaceful. And the Koreans have always managed to maintain quite a stable economy and a stable political position despite these challenges. So I'm sure this time he's going to get a lot of questions about how has the Korean system, how have the institutions managed to maintain this sort of stable period? And I think also, if we link this with AI, he may get a lot of questions about how South Korea has been able to cope with AI, with fake news, and all of these other issues that in Europe they've had a lot of issues with, and America has had a lot of issues with. And so this is really a very key time for democratic changes. In America, we see Donald Trump really testing the American democratic institutions. And in Europe, over the past few years, several different changes to do with nationalism and xenophobia and anti-Semitism. So I think there'll be a lot of interest in these issues.
Right, so definitely all eyes will be on President Lee's message, what he wants to send internationally. But on the sidelines of this General Assembly, there's growing speculation that President Lee and President Trump could also meet again in just a month, hold a second summit, probably. Professor Lim, what do you think are the chances? And if this actually materializes, what kind of agenda do you expect?
Well, I can't again tell you exactly whether or not they can meet up. I'm in the middle of New York City, but the chances can be pretty high because again, physically both the leaders will be in the New York City and in the UN headquarters building, and if so, I mean, by some chances, both government can arrange, even though it might be a very short and brief meeting, but still, who knows, it can be arranged. The thing is, not only just meeting and greeting itself, more probably important thing or more important thing. Now South Korean people are very much more interested in it is again after kind of follow up of the latest the summit between the two leaders. Of course, the mood atmosphere was pretty good. Again, when the President Lee visited the White House, again, the few hours before his visit to the White House, we saw a pretty surprising, the posting, which was made by the President Donald Trump himself. And then Korean society was pretty much surprised and shocked by, that posting. But thankfully, again, the meeting per se, meeting itself between the two leaders became pretty smooth, went pretty smoothly, and the atmosphere was pretty good. The thing is, again, the details, again, the follow-ups, again, how much exactly the investment should be made for one industry, or again, the Korean people who are now detained in the Georgia, what kind of the policy should be made, again, to avoid any further this kind of, the situations. Those kind of, we have lots of important and controversial issues on the table. So I don't think, again, all the things can be just, solved with the one magical meeting. But if they can, again, make a chance, again, to greet each other in the New York City, I think that would be wonderful. But we'll see, because it'll be hectic. It'll be very hectic. The UN, that General Assembly wig is super crowded, and every leader from all around the world will be just greeting to each other. So it'll be very, very, very hectic. So, well, let's see right. What's going on.
So we'll have to see how it goes. Meanwhile, we hear that North Korea is reportedly preparing to send a higher-ranking official to the assembly for the first time in years. What do you think Pyongyang's intention behind this is?
Well, I think Professor Millard already answered to that question. I can't agree more with his observation. Again, that North Korea, their position in the international society changed dramatically. Of course, nuclear weaponization, nuclear weapon program is one big thing, but North Korea's nuclear program has been a long, unreserved agenda for years and years. But more probably important, fundamentally important factor that changed the position of North Korea in the global affair is, again, their support for Russia ever since the war in Ukraine erupted. Again, that they didn't hide any intention. And they explicitly have supported, again, Russia, again, even in the United Nations, and they sent the troops, and they sent the bombshells, and thanks to the sacrifice of their people, again, the North Korea's leadership, they gained this position. Again, as the Professor Millard described, again, Chairman Kim was just next to the presidency. Again, China and Russia are the two of the largest countries in the world. North is absolutely not in that level, but they really changed their position. We have to be very, very, really concerned about this changed dynamics. So I think they are now much more confident than before. So that is why I think they are trying to send a higher officer, and they will certainly, I think, send some messages to the international society, which reflects their, again, the change the position or their change again the mindset, which is again stronger confidence, I will say.
So we're going to see North Korea, the U.S., and South Korea all represented by high-level officials in New York. So, Professor Millard, what kind of potential shifts do you foresee for the diplomacy on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, I think for sure there's going to be some changes to diplomacy because we've mentioned the huge change in position of North Korea, and we've really created, and we're creating, two separate blocks now. There's a very strong North Korea, Russia, China bloc emerging, and that's also therefore creating a US, South Korea, Japan bloc, which means for South Korea, there's going to be a lot of changes in diplomacy. One will be China. In terms of communicating with North Korea, China, for the past several decades, has often acted as a sort of a mediator, sort of a middleman, facilitating dialogue with North Korea. If China moves more towards that bloc with Russia and North Korea, potentially we could see those communication channels being reduced, which is not a great thing. But we can also see, in terms of the denuclearization question, South Korea is going to have to change its position. As Professor In mentioned, North Korea is now in a much stronger position. North Korea no longer really needs to negotiate denuclearization. I mean, let's face it, it never was anyway, but right now it just doesn't need to. So South Korea may also need to change its position, maybe focus a little bit more on arms limitation, something like that. But it's really going to be a big test for South Korea to try to maintain security relations with the US and Japan, trade relations with China, and also try to maintain some relations with Russia and North Korea as well.
Right. So having all these sides in the same place could create, both risks and opportunities for diplomacy. We'll have to see how it goes moving forward. Now, as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Lim.
Thank you.
And Professor Millard, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.